Wonderful. Thank you very much. Huge thanks to the organizers for putting together such an incredible workshop. This is really a great opportunity. And yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with this mobile phone application that goes back to really 2008 in a discussion that I had with Tom Espenshade about mobility research, in which he said, you know, there's this new operating system called Android that's about to be released. Perhaps that's a really good way that we could get some data about this. And little by little, we got sucked into the world of programming apps to collect mobility data and other things, in particular surveys that are linked to location or linked to other aspects of movement. So I'm going to go through the progression of these. I pressed this, right? Good. And I want to highlight some of the key aspects that have come up in this process, and hopefully that'll be good stimulation for discussion afterwards. I see a lot of links to the other talks today, so in some ways, maybe some of this will wait for those talks, but I'd be very interested to hear some of the feedback from others who've been working on specific aspects of this. The starting point, of course, is this is a data collection tool, right? So we need to think at the outset, what type of data do we actually want to collect? And our focus was on mobility, and our focus in the beginning with the app that became what was initially called the Human Mobility Project app was high-resolution movement information linked to location-based surveys. And, but of course, there's a lot more that could go into that decision. One could think about what really is the spatial resolution that you want or need. This links to some of the privacy questions that I'll talk about. There's many reasons for, by which you may want to actually avoid collecting high-resolution movement data and collect some sort of masked data or data that's linked to types of locations or administrative units, things like that, where you actually don't want to learn specifically where people are going. Then the question is also, how much of this data do you want, and how concentrated do you want it? So the plot on the left here is one person's space-time path, where you can see this column, which is their home clearly, and then another smaller column or sparser column, which is their place of work or some socially significant place that they tend to go to. And for many of the questions we want to address, of course, we want to put together these space-time paths and see them with other people. And that's the plot in the middle is a whole bunch of these actual space-time paths that I've artificially put together. Those are the paths that we collected through the Human Mobility Project. But one of the issues is, of course, getting enough people in a concentrated area to be able to do that, right? It's much easier to get people all over the world than to get people close together. And of course, then, do you want to scale this up to be able to really do this at a city level and see huge amounts of data? If you do, how do you actually get enough people to participate in this type of project where they actually have to install an app? The other big question, which links to that, is what are these people going to actually do and see on their device where you have your app installed? So this is typically called user experience, but in our world, perhaps this is like participant experience or human subjects experience. And it really, what you want your people who are using your app to be able to do depends a lot on how you're planning to recruit them, right? Is the user interface of your app part of what gets people to participate, or is it simply something that shouldn't be an obstacle because they're getting some other incentive to participate anyways? When we started this, the image on the left is the original Human Mobility Project app on a G1, the very first Android phone. And the user interface was terrible, right? The person could basically respond to a survey about how happy they were, but we put no effort into actually making it nice at all for them. I then spent a number of years programming this thing to try to make this beautiful user interface where people could really track themselves. They could limit which parts of their track they were looking at, and they could even look at a three-dimensional space-time plot of their own life and move it around on the phone. And that was an enormous amount of work, and I don't think anybody actually cared because most of the people who are using the app really don't care that much about their space-time path. So the latest version is the image on the right, which is just a more straightforward map-focused user interface, and it actually relies on an existing software library. And it's one of the things I'll talk about with the actual kind of practicalities of doing this is more and more you realize that it's good to rely on other software libraries and incorporate them rather than coding things from scratch in every step. So, of course, then, the sampling question that I mentioned, we can see this in the progression of participants that we got in various stages of this research. So in the original project, we got 270 participants. which we were thrilled about, particularly with the user interface that we made and the fact that we did zero advertising, zero recruitment. This was just, we put it out on what was at that point just called the Android store. It wasn't Google Play yet. There were very few apps. People started reviewing it. They were excited that there were these researchers who wanted to let them track themselves, and they just spontaneously started downloading it. But that didn't last, obviously, right? The whole ecosystem of apps and companies involved in competing for people's time took over. And in the next iteration, several years later, with all of this work into the user interface and actually advertising the app on Google Ads, trying to get people all over the world to use it, we managed to get 900 participants, but it was really actually small number compared to the amount of effort that went into that. And also compared to the fact that these participants were just spread out. They weren't really what we wanted, which was people close together. So my main conclusion from this process is that you should not get in the business of trying to compete with private companies who are competing for people's time. Probably the best sampling methods are traditional sampling methods, which then have the app overlaid on top of them, right? So incentives, another form of sampling, relying on existing panels, things like that. Another question, of course, not just sampling people, but actually sampling locations, sampling people's presence. And here we have to get into questions of inference, because we're not actually getting a continuous sample of every place somebody spends time. We're getting discrete samples of places where that person's device located itself based on trilateration with GPS satellites, or some other form, Wi-Fi fingerprinting, whatever it is that went in to the location estimate. And that's done based on some algorithm which you can choose, either a regular time interval or some sort of dynamic sampling where the time interval depends on velocity, so that you're making sure that you get kind of more a constant distance between points as opposed to a constant time between points. But no matter what, you're going to end up having to make inferences. And the graph on the right, which looks nice here but doesn't look very nice here, all that black area are actually contour lines. And this is just showing one approach to inferring where the person is between the measured locations. And these contour lines are actually based on the Brownian bridging approach, which just says, okay, if I know that I'm here at time A and I'm here at time B, if I just assume, just diffusion, right, just Brownian motion between these points, but constrained by the fact that I know I have to be here and here at these two time points, then I can come up with probabilities about where I might have been between those two time points. Then, of course, the survey part, right? A lot of what we're interested in is linking these locations to a lot of other information that we can get from surveys, from ecological momentary assessment. And then we need to think about what triggers the survey, right? Are these location-based, which is our original approach? But of course, if they're location-based, then you need to have some idea about what locations you care about and what locations the people you recruit are likely to actually be near. So in our initial design, which was more just a methodological test, we had the existing locations of people as they were coming in be the basis of the trigger points, right? Because then we knew at least we had somebody who was passing through that location on a regular basis. Obviously, if you have a sample that you're recruiting in a particular geographic space, you can have much more control or can think more closely about the types of locations you want to trigger the survey. Then you need to think, what is this, what's going to actually get the person to respond? Okay, I'm finishing. So, okay, ethics. We can talk about ethics in the discussion, data protection particularly, but also this question of control, and this tool approach to how to actually manage the development of the tool. Here, I'll skip forward and talk about, or actually leave open for discussion, the latest version, and the key message, and I think for me the most important insight is that the logistics of actually developing this thing matter a lot. And developing an app for a specific research project is a disaster, but developing an app that could be used by many research projects, I think, is the key. So this is the idea of the new version that's now available, and you could actually start trying it out if you're interested, is to make it possible to just simply add a project to an existing app. Thank you.